Welcome, everyone, to the latest Detroit Lions Lone Wolves podcast. As you guys are watching this, I'll be en route to Indianapolis for the Combine. I'm chatting it up with my guy, Christian. Ahead of the Combine, we're going to take a look at what are we going to look at. Christian's going to tell me, hey, we need to pay attention to these players. These are the things that have to be noted and jotted down, the things that will take place at the Combine, my first time there. I'm excited to check it all out, to see what the buzz is all about regarding the Lions. And later in this podcast, we'll talk about some athletes some prospects that could potentially fit the Detroit Lions in later rounds. Clearly, in earlier podcasts, which you can check out at Lions on SI and YouTube, you can check out the early names, the early list of players. And at Lions on SI, we've documented several of the positions, I think all of them, in regards to players to watch at every position heading into this Combine. But before we get started into the prospects, there's some interesting stuff that has come out over the course of the last 48 to 72 hours. And I think one of the intriguing ones for Lions fans and those that are still paying attention to the career of Matthew Stafford is the Rams have allowed him and told his agent, you can go out and kind of learn what your market is and come back and share. Similar to what happened with Saquon Barkley. He was free to go and kind of pursue what was going on because there is a contract situation brewing with Matthew Stafford. Now, it doesn't guarantee. This is not a situation in which the Rams have said, see you later, you're now no longer part of the organization. They saved that for Cooper Kupp. They just said, you're done. Now, for Matthew Stafford, it's one of those deals where he probably wants more guaranteed monies beyond the contract that he's got, and he wants to kind of rework things to give himself some more security. That's what it's about with these big-time contracts, based on the fact that he's a playoff-proven quarterback. He's the face of that team. He's somebody that is integral, but at his elevated age and his cap number, I think the Rams are starting to look at, okay, what's the future hold, and they may not want to allocate as many funds to Matthew Stafford. So it's not a guarantee he gets traded, but the talk and where there's smoke, there's fire kind of brewing in regards to the veteran quarterback. And so I'm curious, if he does get dealt, there are a handful of teams that should make some calls and inquire about Matthew Stafford. I don't know if, the Giants are going to be willing to part with a top pick for Matthew Stafford, but a team, I think a couple teams that should be in the mix that are needing quarterbacks are the Steelers, Giants, and this team, which is what we're going to talk about here. Are you concerned if Matthew Stafford ends up with the Vikings, if they make the call and say, hey, what does it take? And they figure it out and they say, you know what, this is an upgrade over Sam Darnold. We can have J.J. McCarthy learn from a gunslinger. This is a more favorable comp as a veteran that could definitely suit the needs of a developing quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. You let him sit for a year and you bring in Matthew Stafford for a couple years. Look, I would say it's intriguing now, would I be concerned? Not terribly, but I would say that you look at Matthew Stafford with Justin Jefferson, Addison, a solid run game, and a defense that's growing, young, and hungry. I think that puts the Vikings in a spot where they can be competitive, go toe-to-toe with the Lions for the division. How concerned are you? What'd you make of the Matthew Stafford talk now that he's able to kind of go see what he's worth on the open market? And I think it's going to come back to be that he's going to be coveted because of the fact he's a winner, he's gritty, and the fact that there's not too many true Super Bowl caliber quarterbacks that are available in the National Football League.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that it's a very interesting fit between Stafford and the Minnesota Vikings. You're talking about a veteran quarterback who's won a Super Bowl, but not just that. He's played in this division. He knows what it takes to win at Lambeau and to win at Soldier Field and to win at Ford Field. And I do think it would be really interesting to kind of see that wrap around with. I know some people are sick of the narrative of Stafford coming back to Detroit for his reunion and this, that, and the other, like talking about the postseason a couple seasons ago, and then obviously opening the regular season on Sunday Night Football in 2024, and just the fanfare that comes with that. Matt Stafford was a great player for the Lions organization. He didn't take them to the winning heights that many hoped he would when they drafted him first overall, but I do think it would be interesting to see him come back in the NFC North and play for the Vikings. Obviously, there's a lot to like about the potential fit. With the style of offense, Coach Kevin O'Connell. And then you look at what they did with Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold was a quarterback that had been cast aside by most of the league in terms of a lot of people thought maybe he'd reached his ceiling in the NFL, and they didn't think he had much more meat left on the bone. But he was excellent for the Vikings this year, and I know a lot of that is because of the steps he took to grow in his own development. But I also do think that the scheme that the Vikings deploy have played a big role in that. It made life a lot easier for him. And anytime you're paired up with guys like Justin Jefferson out wide, that is going to make life super easy as a quarterback. You can just throw it up to one of the best wide receivers in the game right now. And I do think that's why if Matt Stafford were to land in Minnesota, you're talking about a team that is going to compete for a division title and maybe could be considered the favorite in the division. Obviously, the Lions bring back a ton of talent. They should be expected to win the division and make a postseason run, but I think having Stafford back in the division and all the weapons that the Vikings have offensively is certainly going to make life tough. And obviously, their stadium is one of the best atmospheres in the league, and it shines through when you watch a game on television, just how invested their fan base is. And I do think that would be a really exciting fit if the Vikings were to land him. If you're a Vikings fan, like how could you not be pumped up about bringing a guy that's won a Super Bowl to your team? And it is a little bit weird the way the Rams are handling this offseason with the whole Cooper Kupp thing, just blatantly saying, hey, we're going to trade you. And then with the Stafford stuff too, like I'm not quite sure what's going on over there. But yeah, I there is a level of concern if Stafford were to land in Minnesota, and we'll have to see how this all plays out. But I think that if you're a team in the NFC North, you'd certainly like to see him land somewhere else. That said, I don't think anybody's going to be scared of him, and Stafford is on the older side of things. But as he showed at times last year, especially when the Rams really got hot there towards the end of the season, he's still got a lot of good football left in him. At least it feels that way. Obviously, injuries and things of that nature could have other options for him, but I mean, it's hard to say confidently that, Matt Stafford is not a concern if he comes to the NFC North. So we'll see how it all plays out, but that's certainly an intriguing fit for the veteran passer.
Agree. And you got that whole drama with Kerby Joseph. You now could
Mm-hmm.
have a burgeoning rivalry with the Vikings continuing with Matthew Stafford, who has called Kerby Joseph dirty to his face and publicly regarding, the way in which the Lions star safety plays. So it'll be intriguing because it'll spark the debate twice a year regarding Stafford and Jared Goff, and we'll see how potentially how Matthew Stafford's saga shakes out. He may end up returning to the Rams, but maybe finding out fairly what the market is. I think the Rams are just, at least at this point, preliminarily trying to understand what the market is for Matthew Stafford, and they've given him and his representatives the permission to go find out what that is. And that's fair. That's fair to Matthew Stafford to say, hey, look, if you're upset that Cooper Kupp's not going to be there anymore, then if you want to depart, then it's amicable because they won the ring. That he's done everything that the organization would want, and if it's just a money situation, sometimes that's the business of the National Football League. And speaking of the business of the league, let's turn our attention to the Lions' business. And so this topic is predicated from the video that emerged of Aidan Hutchinson running at Ford Field. Now, clearly, based on the video footage, he would not have been ready for the Super Bowl. It was clear. I think that was just motivational thing for him to kind of keep him motivated to keep grinding and keep going. So clearly, he's not at 100% just yet. But I think where he's at is he's clear to resume his activities and his rehab to be able to, hey, work hard towards the pursuit of returning by organized team activities. And by all accounts, he should be an individual that is ready to step foot out there. Now, the question mark is going to be, what level of production is he going to have? Is he going to have the same mobility? Is he going to have the same moves? Is he going to be able to still utilize the swim move to get after the duck and under, the power rush? Is he going to be able to have and utilize the same skill set? Now, currently, the expectation from everybody that's been speaking has been they expect him to be 100%. But it's real delicate because of the fact he's eligible for a massive contract extension. We're talking record breaking, north of 40 million per season. I think the Lions will want to investigate and make sure that they, hey, make it a priority. But when Brad Holmes was asked, he said, hey, it takes two to tango. And maybe the representatives of Aidan Hutchinson weren't ready yet to lay out a number that they think based on what the market could dictate. So there could be some waiting going on. But now let's look at it from the Lions' perspective. Do you wait and see on Aidan Hutchinson before you offer? Do you wait and say, hey, play out the 2025 season on your contract and we always have the fifth year option available to you? Or do you say, hey, you know what? The work that you did in 2024, you still were up there in sacks, the sack leader for the Lions with the numbers that you put up in the games that you were available for. So it's one of those things that's delicate because if you make that decision, I would understand it because you want to see what the player brings to the table. You want to see, hey, if Aidan lost a step and he's not going to be there, you don't want to pay for past success. The idea of giving Aidan that contract would indicate, hey, we believe you're going to get north of 15 sacks every single year. Now, the expectation would be that he does, fight for that contract and he would definitely earn the money that he got. But at the same token, if you're the Lions, this is delicate because if you make a mistake and he's not the same player, you now invested a heavy amount of money into a player that is not going to be as productive. Do you make Aidan Hutchinson your offseason priority this year? And do you do it? Or do you say, hey, wait and see? What are the options you think the Lions could have with Aidan Hutchinson?
Well, I stand firm in believing that Aidan Hutchinson will sign a contract extension this offseason, and here's why. Number one, the precedent that Brad Holmes has set with Penei Sewell, with Amon-Ra St. Brown last year in the offseason. He got those guys signed early. And the thing is we've seen the salary cap continue to increase, and with that, the value of these players is only going to continue to go up. And you talk about the different percentages that this player should be making as it refers to the salary cap because they're a huge part of their team, so they should make this percentage of the salary cap. And I firmly believe that that's the way this thing's heading. And if the cap is going to continue to climb by 20 million, you could look like a real genius by getting deals like this done early. And yes, I do believe that Aidan Hutchinson has a chance to reset the market for players at his position. But again, you think about the injury, maybe the value goes down just a little bit, but I think the Lions are going to do everything they can to get this thing done early. Now, you do have the option of getting the fifth-year option and letting it play out and having him under contract. But the Lions do have the kind of persona of being a team that likes to avoid the drama that comes with all the contract disputes and holdouts and things of that nature that we've seen across the league for the last several years. And I think because of that, the Lions stand to extend Aidan Hutchinson this offseason, and I really like their chances of doing so. Yes, the injury is a concern. Yes, will he be back up to 100% remains a concern. But I think that at some point you have to recognize the fact like he is when he's healthy, he's one of the best in the business. And I think the Lions are gonna take a chance on that because of what he means to the team, what he means to the organization as a local product, and what he's already proven he can do. And another thing about Aidan Hutchinson is he's gotten better every single year. And yes, he did have that lull where he went several games without a sack in his second NFL season. But then once he got one there near the end of the year, he had that big game against Dallas, and he was lights out in the postseason. So, and then that has played into what he did at the start of the 2024 season. So I think the sky's the limit for Aidan Hutchinson, and I think the Lions view him that way. And so I think that extension will get done this offseason. And I think that there are a lot of benefits to that. Getting him locked up early, that market's only going up, and the Lions have shown that they're willing to be ahead of the market with how they handled it last offseason, and I expect them to do the same this year.
As we said in previous episodes, the agents love Christian because he wants that deal done. They're going to get Aidan fat money. And the agents are like, yeah, that's why we love Christian. That's why the envelopes are coming. The texts are going his way as opposed to me, where I'm like, well, I'm sitting at the table. Well, he did, snap his leg. And that's a big investment. You want how much? What if you're willing to, let's talk hometown discount truly for the hometown guy. So we'll see how it plays out. We'll see how and when the timing of that does occur. But I do think it has to be handled delicately. And I'm curious
Yeah.
to see the figures. And as we projected on Lines on SI, we've done some early projections as to what those numbers could look like. But also, what is intriguing is there's a couple other players that also are potentially due for massive extensions. So let's play a round of either or. A couple decisions the Lions have to make that could potentially also impact the cap, impact their standing with the Lions, and in terms of their spot on the roster. Let's look at it from this perspective. Starting in free agency, who should the Lions prioritize first? Most important, if you could only have one person back, either or, Carlton Davis, the veteran, on the in the secondary, or the veteran guard in Kevin Zeitler, who had a good season, who would solidify that offensive line, but is a candidate to be replaced by a young player that really acclimated well, and when he was given his opportunity, played really well with the offensive line and kind of showcased why he was a draft pick. Christian Mahogany's earned the confidence of a lot of people. I think he's a confident player, ready to put in the work when you battle all year and you still are in meetings and learning and everything. And then you get your opportunity and you play at a high level. I think there's an opportunity for him to kind of slot in there and take the veteran spot. But you can never have too many decent offensive linemen. But to me, it's Carlton Davis because of the fact that I think his mentorship of Tyrion Arnold is valuable, and I think he just is a talented player. Now, the question mark is he's never, for the last, several seasons, I don't think ever has played more than 14 games in a season, and I think the last time that was 2020. So he's always missing a handful of games, and he did miss after the Bills game, though the remainder of the season did not appear in the Commanders game. But I just think what he brings to the table, I think the question mark for Davis and the Lions is going to be how much. Is he going to get north of 17? Are the Jets or multiple teams going to put in a massive offer for him? You might have to make a delicate decision. But if you're prioritizing, I think between Kevin Zeitler and Carlton Davis, I think the vote goes to Carlton Davis from me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in this round I'm taking Carlton Davis, and the reason for that is the type of cornerback that likes to play the way the Lions defense wants to play. They're hard to find, and when you can get a veteran one who's won a Super Bowl and has that confidence and leadership about him, you got to keep that around. And like you said, he's an excellent mentor for guys like Arnold and Rakestraw and guys that maybe they could take a chance on in the draft even this year. Who knows? And I think that he does just really fit what the Lions do really well. And that's not to say Kevin Zeitler doesn't, because Kevin Zeitler was an excellent addition for the Lions offensive line. They got him a little bit later in the free agency process on a one-year deal. And I think that that was one of the best moves of the offseason. He was awesome up front. But I think that given his age, and the fact that if he were to return, it would likely only be on a short-term deal. I do think that there's a benefit for letting a guy like Christian Mahogany go out there and try and fail a little bit. And if he messes up and he struggles, then you give him an opportunity to learn from it. And I also think that there are some options, especially early on in this draft, where they could really boost the interior offensive line. So I think there's some options there as well to replace Zeitler. I think that obviously the Lions, when everybody's healthy, they have one of the best offensive lines in the league. But I do think that there's people in place to where if Zeitler were to go, they would have capable replacements ready to roll. And they've shown that amidst injuries throughout the last several years. So Davis, on the other hand, is just his style of play and how well it fits the Lions is hard to replicate. So I think that if you have to choose between the two of them, it's got to be Carlton Davis.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting to see his market. Now, if Jameson Williams sees this, I want to preface this. We don't have your name in our mouths. You know what I mean? So we want to avoid any of the photos that you may post. We are having a normal discussion about JMO. We're not talking about suspensions or his place on the team. We're just talking money. So we do got his name on a topic sheet that we do, because he's, I want to preface it if he's watching. It's all respect, talking about what we got to talk about. People have to give their opinions, but I just don't want to end up with, certain, symbols showing up, online after our discussion. So, with that said, this is money talk, and either or, two more players are due for a potential massive amount of money. And just the way that Brad Holmes has operated and the way in which clearly the person earned it based on the history, like you said, with Amon-Ra, Panay, in that mix is Kerby Joseph. I think he's due for fat money. He's going to get a healthy extension. He's proven, hey, I make the goal of wanting to have the most interceptions. I am the emotional leader. I'm the physical dominant presence on the Detroit Lions. I do the dirty work and I execute. You got to give him the money. But at the same token, wide receivers with the skill set of Jameson Williams who have the potential, when you go, wow, the ceiling for that guy, if he can keep his head on straight, it's the sky's the limit truly. And, those guys are not asking for pay cuts. That's big money, potentially north of 30 million per is where the CD Lambs of the world and the St. Browns are asking. Now, could he earn less? Potentially. Maybe the Lions would offer a little bit less. But I do think that, in my humble opinion, I think that the smart thing to do would be to give Jameson Williams the fifth-year option and make him prove it
Mhm.
still continuously, and then you hand Kerby Joseph whatever he wants. I think he deserves to be the highest paid safety. He set the market. He's durable. He understands what he's got to do. And the one thing that you can't teach is, hey, where's the football? Kerby goes to find it. So they all get paid. And I just think that you need to have Jameson continue to earn it. And look, in my humble opinion, I think you can find now you can't find a Jameson Williams in the draft, but the positions that are seemingly the fastest, the skill position players are coming in droves. And there are a lot of great wide receivers that can, be speedy and talented. But at the same token, you already got someone in the system. But either or, you can only pick one. So again, we're just talking business here. Either or, who gets the fat contract? Kerby Joseph, Jameson Williams. If there's one to give out.
Yeah, it's got to be Kerby Joseph, and obviously Jameson Williams does have the advantage of having that fifth year option. So if the Lions don't feel comfortable about paying Jameson Williams a hefty contract extension this offseason, they can simply take the fifth year option, accept it, and table these discussions for a year and allow him to continue to prove himself. And I think that that would be a worthwhile gamble both for the Lions and Jameson Williams. And if Jameson Williams goes out and has a huge year without an extension, then the Lions almost are on the wrong end of this because that value for him is only going to go up given how fast he is and all the different ways he can impact the game. But I think in the immediate future, you have to make that move to bring back Kerby Joseph long term. And obviously, he doesn't have the fifth year option. So this is a deal that needs to get done this offseason, or you run the risk of him outperforming his contract again, and then that money continues to climb for the Illinois product. So I like what Kerby Joseph has done. He's another guy who's grown every single year and capped it off. And that kind of third year bump that we've seen from a lot of Brad Holmes draftees. And you talk about St. Brown going over 1,500 yards in his third NFL season, and Penei Sewell and St. Brown both earning all-pro honors in their third NFL season, and the season that Hutch was having before he got injured, and JMO going over 1,000 yards in his third season. That third-year bump is real for some of these Lions guys, and it'll be fun to follow along with the next draft class. But getting back to my point, Kerby Joseph, as the NFL leader in interceptions, proved that he has a skill that is tough to replicate, and that's his natural instincts for finding the football. Anytime you get a player like that in a defensive scheme like the Lions have, where it's a lot of man coverage oriented type of defense, you have to keep that guy around. And he seems like he's really great with his teammates. He's ascended into being a leader, and it really sticks out to me, a comment that Dan Campbell made. It was either during the preseason or very early in the regular season when Dan Campbell talked about how Kerby Joseph needed to become a staple of the defense, and he needed to become a leader and assert himself because that was the natural next step for him. And he did exactly that, and I think he should be rewarded as such.
Okay, yeah, very fair. So if JMO does feel the need to send a reply, send it to Christian. He okayed the topic. I sent it. But the way it goes is I send the topics and Christian approves or denies it. So all the blame goes to Christian. If you love the segment, all the praise goes to me because it's my idea. So that's how it's going to go. You take all the criticisms for approving it and letting this air and letting this go to Cameron for the video. And if it's a bad idea, it's all your fault. If it's a wonderful idea and JMO's okay with getting the massive amount of money still you get for the fifth year option, it's still good, great money. Money you can live on. Then it's all good. Then you can praise the DOC. That's how it's going to be. That's just the way the hierarchy goes. You praise me, and Christian gets all the complaints. That's just the best way to put it, and that's how we're going to operate for the foreseeable future. All right, with our last 10, 20 minutes here, it's time. Look, we've done a lot of work already about the combine. Like I said, Lions on SI, you can see every single position group that we've done. In regards to players to watch, information's there, podcasts we've done. You can go to YouTube, see all the videos and the early talks. Now, I just want to get your sense because we all know the names of the guys that are key that will potentially be there at 28 and 60. We know the edge rushers, the offensive linemen. We know where to look. Now, starting with defense, day 2, day 3, guys, as we observe what's going on, as the players talk, who are some names that people must pay attention to as fits that the Lions could pay attention to because they could look deeper in the draft, look to schools that maybe are outside the box as well in regards to talent. They could look to Boston College, look out east, look out west as well. But bottom line, the higher end players are from the SEC and the Blue Bloods. But later on, there's some depth along that defensive
Mhm.
front that you can get cornerbacks as well, linebackers as well. Who are a couple names, three, four names, or people that have come across your watch list that, hey, when the time comes, they start working out, DOC better be watching.
Yeah, so if you're talking about guys defensively, one name I want you to keep an eye on is Western Michigan's Bilal Kone. Now, I know that my Central fellow CMU alumni may not be super happy with me mentioning a guy from Western, but the point is that this guy's skill set transcends the rivalry. When I was doing my research, this is a name I first came upon. I'm a big fan of John Gruden and the new endeavor he's on at Barstool Sports, and he's had a bunch of different draft prospects come in, and Bilal Kone from Western Michigan was one of them. And right away, you're impressed with his frame. He's a long, lanky cornerback who possesses the kind of athleticism needed to play corner in the Lions' defensive scheme. You talk about a guy who's had some production. He kind of bounced around at the collegiate level. He's a junior college product. And then went to Indiana State for a year and then to Western Michigan for a couple of seasons to finish off his collegiate career. And Bilal Kone is a name that may not go off the board on day two, and he's probably right now suited for mid to late day three just because he's not the most familiar name. But I think that he has a chance to show his testing as a way of his portraying his athleticism to scouts. And I think that if he has a good week in Indianapolis, this is a name that could start to climb draft boards based solely on what he possesses from a physical trait perspective and the way he could develop into being a standout player defensively. I really, really like the potential of Bilal Kone. Another name, Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma, a guy who just fits the profile. When you talk about physical linebackers, and SEC, Oklahoma in the SEC now, so he's a guy who's been exposed to some of those top tier talents. And what that Oklahoma defense did to Alabama when those two teams played, I mean, that just pops off charts for me. And Stutzman, obviously, a big part of that defense throughout his career at Oklahoma. I really like the physicality that he plays with, the toughness. His pass coverage didn't grade out super well via PFF. But there are some things about the way he plays the pass that you can work with. And I think that Danny Stutzman is probably a day two guy. But again, a physical guy. Seems like he's a leader of that group. And I really, really like Danny Stutzman in reviewing his tape over the last couple of weeks. Another guy that's been working out with Coach Gruden as well. So those guys are getting good leadership from one of, a Super Bowl winning coach. So those are a couple of defensive names that have caught my eye. Obviously, there's a ton out there. Oklahoma has a really solid safety who's adept at taking the ball away. Kansas cornerback Mello Dotson is another guy that's had a ton of interceptions and a ton of production, probably slated for day three as well. I could go on and on. I love looking at the day two, day three names. There's so many good prospects. I'll have to send you a list after we get off air so you can check them all out when you're down in Indianapolis.
Yeah, no, defense is key. I think that that's very important when you look at what this line. I mean, every time we talked about today on Sunday evening, when I'm recapping comments that people are saying, you put out as you went, you started defense with your previews, and then you went offense. As you went wide receiver, running back, quarterback, people are like defense, defense. It's like, guys, Brad Holmes is going to target and have names on his board that are on the offense, so it's always good to pay attention to who's out there. So I'm curious to see in regards to some defensive players that are going to shine, and it's always key to pay attention because there's going to be some steals, and that's going to be important as you recognize that hey, the Lions found Makai Wingo last year later, they found Christian Mahogany later, and so some of these picks later on are going to be very important. Anyone else stick out athleticism maybe at a spot people aren't looking at, maybe linebacker or safety that jump off the page as well?
I don't have my list in front of me, but I will say that the safety from Oklahoma, Billy Bowman, is awesome. I mean, he plays super hard. He's kind of an undersized guy, but a ton of production on the ball, a bunch of interceptions playing for the Sooners, and really just kind of plays with a mean streak from the defensive back position. That Oklahoma defense, man, they took their lumps this past year. Oklahoma kind of struggled in their first year in the SEC, but they did have some players on that defense, man. I really liked what he has to offer. So, and then obviously you go down the line with linebackers, and there's going to be good players regardless of round or position. Carson Schlesinger has really climbed the ladder, so he's a little bit more of a household name nowadays. But that was somebody who I like just in watching different Big Ten games. Obviously, with UCLA being in the Big Ten now, you turn on a Big Ten game, and he's just right in the middle of all the action. He had hundreds of tackles in his collegiate career, just a really tough kid as well. So, yeah, I mean, there's names all over the place, and there's good players on defense throughout this draft. I think the edge class, the defensive tackle class, both pretty deep. And there's good players just about everywhere you look. So I'm excited to see them all compete in Indianapolis and show off their physical abilities and go from there as we continue to evaluate.
Yeah, a name that I pay attention to clearly because I've seen Oregon come to the big house is Jordan Birch, the
Mm.
defensive tackle. I think that when you see the fact that he's kind of sometimes gets overshadowed by Derek Harmon, but I think Birch has the potential to potentially be somebody the Lions pay attention to in regards to, filling in not only the edge rusher spot, but the defensive tackle spot is key as well because Aleem McNeil is a player that is somebody that, is going to come back, but you don't know exactly if if he's going to come back and perform at the level at the start of the year. So hopefully by the playoffs he does. And then another name from Louisville is the edge rusher Ashton Gillot, I think his name is somebody that I think jumps off the tape and somebody that people have sent to me as well. Pardon me if I missed that. I mean, the names are I'm just terrible with. We'll just start with the opportunity there that I think that he does in regards to his size, have the ability to potentially slot in there and maybe take some time to develop, but be a player that, Casey Rogers may want to develop. And I think that, for a lot of these guys, these later guys, what has to happen is their combine testing numbers have to kind of start to showcase what they got. Because yeah, the tape shows something, but they also have to have at least the measurables that are going to compete and compare. So, but at the same token, Brad Holmes definitely indicates that, hey, he wants guys that are performers, and I think the Louisville player definitely does. The edge rusher there has showcased some ability there, and I think he's got some of that grit that you would want from a player at that spot, somebody that could be opposite of Aidan. I think has a chance, but I think his testing numbers are going to determine where he slots. Turning your attention to the offense, who do you think stands out? Because yes, I do not think, I could be wrong, but I do not think that Brad Holmes is going to have an all defense draft. It's not going to happen. Now, the position that I think clearly that they're going to probably target, the offensive line. They could target some competition, maybe the big bodied receiver, maybe another running back, but that's kind of out of the question. But I think a name, I think a position that many people don't think they need, but they could still target is tight end. I think they like what they have in Sam Laporta and Brock Wright, but there's still competition to be had behind them. So I think that maybe a tight end or a wide receiver, maybe one of those positions, you can even find depth as an undrafted free agent. But I do think for certain there will be a lineman on the offensive line taken. Tell me some names that have caught your attention. Maybe day two guys that people aren't talking about too much.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that there's some interesting names with the offensive line when you take a look at guys like a Willie Lampkin. Willie Lampkin was a guy that Daniel Jeremiah mentioned and you wrote about. Is he gonna? He's not going to be in Indianapolis, unfortunately. And so you're going to have to wait to see what he has to offer until his pro day. But again, that's a guy that physically he may not be the most eye-popping guy, but when you watch him play, you see a dude that is just tenacious, and he's not scared to mix it up with all the different defensive linemen that he's had to work against throughout his career. Which in the ACC, there's some pretty good talents when you talk about defenses from Clemson and Boston College and guys that perennially have these NFL defensive linemen. And Willie Lampkins just stood the test of time against these guys, so it's been fun to watch him develop. When you look a little bit deeper at the tight end class and you talk about a guy like Jake Brenningstool from Clemson, who was pretty productive for the Tigers. I know that they reached the college football playoff and they had 3 losses, I believe, in the regular season, but found a way to get into the playoff. And Brenningstool is a guy that has just been kind of doing it all for Clemson throughout his career. Really good pass catcher, can mix it up and block as well. And then if you want to get into Michigan, guys with Michigan ties, you talk about a guy like Caden Priestcorn from Ole Miss, who is from Lake Orion, I believe. and had a really good start to his career at Memphis and then transferred to Ole Miss and was a really big part of their passing attack for the last couple seasons. So, yeah, there's depth everywhere. I'm really looking forward to seeing, especially on that offensive line, who separates themselves because there's a cluster of prospects that kind of look like they're destined for maybe late day one, early day two. When you talk about the Tyler Bookers of the world, Gray Zabel, Donovan Jackson, and then who separates themselves amongst that group. And then this other pod of offensive linemen, both on the interior and the offensive tackles, who takes that next step from being a guy that might be looked at as a day three pick to being a day two pick with some ability to contend for a spot early in day two. So that's what the combine's all about. And I cannot wait to especially see these offensive linemen. Every year there's one or two of them that run these blazing fast 40s despite
Yeah.
their size. And it's just so much fun to watch. So that'll be one position group for sure I'm keeping an eye on.
Yeah, and the wide receiver that kind of sticks out that's similar that could compete with Tim Patrick is Jaden Higgins out of Iowa
Yes.
State. I think you've
Yes.
started to talk about him, so I've watched his highlights, and I think that there'll be some recommendations maybe made from the Lions coaching staff for him based on the talent that he brings to the table. I think that he's a player that could be very much in line with what they're looking for. What do you think, and what do you make of? Because clearly, Brad Holmes definitely is intrigued by players from Alabama. He's seen CJ Depre from Alabama, the tight end. What do you think about the potential that he's got? I think he's an athletic pass catcher, kind of in the mold of Sam Laporta. But I think he maybe needs a little bit more development. Maybe many kind of look at him day two, maybe day three kind of option. Do you go with skill position there, or is another tight end that potentially suits what the Lions could look for? See, the issue is with now the Lions tight end, they're looking for someone really prolific as a blocker. I think Sam
Yes.
Laporta is going to be
Yes.
somebody that's going to be taking all of the attention. So I'm curious to see what ends up happening with the tight end. Anybody else that sticks out to you that's an offensive weapon? Maybe do you think that the Lions could look to Alabama for maybe a position outside of quarterback that that you've looked at? I think the tight end could be interesting, especially if it's a later round and he's still there.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about Alabama, I think Booker's your guy on the interior offensive line. I think I like that fit. And I think if he's on the board at 28, he's going to get a serious look from the Lions. I like that you mentioned Higgins, and I'm not like a full Jaden Higgins expert quite yet. I still need to continue to kind of get deeper in his repertoire. But from what I've seen, there's a little Josh Reynolds there in his game as far as his build, his route running, the way he creates separation, and then when he needs to go get a 50-50 ball, he can go get it. The Lions loved Josh Reynolds. Obviously, there was the contract that they offered him. They might have lowballed him a little bit in free agency, but from when he was with the Lions obviously appreciated his skill set and his willingness to do the little things. I think Higgins is a guy where if he's sitting there day two, whether it's at 60, whether it's at I believe the estimation for the compensatory pick is 101, and he's just there. That's a guy you should probably be keeping an eye on if you're a Lions fan. I like Higgins a lot, just in what I've been able to see. And then I think with Alabama, I think that conversation starts with Tyler Booker. And then, maybe they do throw a little consideration at a guy like Jalen Milroe. But I think right now the prime target for the Lions, just because of how well he would fit, is Tyler Booker from Alabama. And I think if the Lions go back to that it's probably going to be Booker.
Okay, one last thought here for the casual fan, because we know there's a lot of hardcore fans that
Mm-hmm.
follow us and follow every site, and they know what they're going to watch. The three cone drills. I joke with the other reporters about, hey, make sure you tell me what those are. Hand length and all that. The
Yeah.
40-yard dash, all of that kind of stuff. But for the casual viewer, for the first time person that's going to sit down and watch some workouts, obviously the 40-yard dash is key. Speed. The NFL loves speed. And clearly, the passing drills from the quarterbacks, the accuracy of the quarterbacks, you're going to want to see. You're going to want to see the passing prowess of the receivers, their ability to move
Mm-hmm.
with the football and get in and out of their routes and the ability to work their footwork. But for the casual fan that's going to start taking in the combine and they're going to sit and they're going to watch a couple hours, what, from your experience watching, what has dictated to you some things that, oh, okay, this is what some of the general manager evaluators look at for some of these players? What do you look at that says, okay, I'm going to jot this down when I go report it for Lions on SI?
Yeah, so a couple of the big things for me are obviously the 40-yard dash tells me a lot about straight line speed. You get into the three cone. Then you learn a little bit about their agility. How quickly can they change direction? How quickly are they able to move their feet and flip their hips? And then you talk about like the broad jump, and that's all explosiveness. How explosive is this athlete? So if somebody puts together this jaw-dropping broad jump, then you know, okay, this is one of the more explosive athletes in this draft. And the same can be said about the vertical jump. So those are kind of the big takeaways. You learn a lot about their physical skill and what are their gifts? What is each player's superpower? Is it their straight line speed? Is it their strength in the bench press? Is it their agility? Is it their explosiveness? And then you compile all that together and you start to really get a frame of reference for what this player could be at the next level. And you talk about teams. What is this team's history? Do they like to draft players who are explosive? Do they like to draft players who are tough? Do they like players who are fast? And then you can kind of formulate an idea. Okay, this player has X, Y, and Z. This is what they're good at. This team likes X, Y, and Z. Boom. Now we have a match. And then you can start to really formulate an idea of how April's draft might go. And the draft is no perfect science, and no two cases are alike. But to me, that just I really enjoy watching it. Number one, to see how all the athletes perform. And number two, how do we come out viewing this player? And I think that the important thing is, when you watch the scouting combine, you don't have to have the same opinions as everybody else, because there's going to be dominant media narratives and opinions that are going to be out surrounding all these players. But if you see something different, then that's the way you feel. And I think that everybody should kind of experience the combine in their own way. And obviously there's like objective traits, and just because you time somebody at a 4.3 doesn't mean they ran a 4.3. But I think your overall opinion doesn't necessarily have to be shaped. And that's why the combine's so fun.
Lots of different opinions. Hopefully we continue to be in the mix for your viewership and some knowledge from some of these players, as Christian and I'll be there, boots on the ground. Christian will also be watching from afar as we talk to Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes at the combine, and definitely visit Lions on SI. We'll continue to bring daily coverage, videos, insider analysis. And then you failed to mention the one thing that clearly athletes and prospects, people want to know: their strength and their speed. Well, we talked about the 40-yard dash. Well, I can share my max rep 250. One. That's all I got for you, baby. Bench press is one. John Doc Macaroon, one on the bench press, barely gets it up. Maybe the guy's got to kind of push it up. Come on, mother. Come on. All right. One. That's it. That's all you get. Put it back down. I'm done. Done for the day. I'm a talker. I'm a writer. I'm not no size. Max rep one. The other one I love is, they don't show it as much, I know, because it's always in the background for me, but when they're there, it's boom, boom. I want to know 25 or more. How many times can these athletes pump out 250 pounds, I think, a couple plates on each side, and how many, or 225 maybe?
It might be 225.
225. How many times? And look, it'll be fun to watch. That's something I always pay attention to see, especially when they're a little bit later on and they're 13, 14. How many do they get up? How much more do they muster? That's something I always enjoy watching. So stay tuned as we report on the numbers and what these numbers mean for the Detroit Lions. Thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate your viewership. Check out our new YouTube channel, putting up all the videos, podcasts there as well. And you can visit daily Lions on SI for free, FREE, all the coverage, nothing behind a paywall. Check us out. We'll bring you the inside coverage from the combine, prospects to know what they're saying, what's going on, the buzz, what we're hearing, and hopefully you're entertained as well. And that's what we aim to bring you guys, is knowledge and some entertainment as well. And that's why I think you guys have peaked at the podcast more and more, and we appreciate it. Christian, thanks for your time recording this and doing everything you've done, behind the scenes work, manning the ship as I travel out to Indianapolis. Thanks for being a vital member of the operation, and make sure you follow Christian's work as he guides the draft and follows along with the podcast and brings information in a lot of different ways, written form and via the podcast platform. Thanks everybody. Let's talk next time on the latest edition of the Detroit Lions Lone Wolves podcast.